Hi, my name is Faith Frederickson, and I'm a meteorologist with the National Weather Service office in Gaylord, Michigan. This is part two of a two-part series on how to use the new Weather Service radar page. This is the version that's a little bit more in-depth, and it's also a little bit longer of a presentation as well. So if you're watching this, you've probably already watched part one of this series on the new radar page. And part one basically covered how to use it if you only want to use it like you use the old radar page. And it might be beneficial to take a look at part one, even if briefly, just to kind of familiarize yourself with some of the things and some of the basics with the new radar page. As we mentioned in part one, we understand how you feel because we know a thing or two about the major changes in the way we view radar imagery. On the left is the WSR-57 radar screen from Cincinnati on the day of the 1974 super outbreak. And back in those days, we had to trace storms onto thin paper maps and basically just outline these blobs on thin paper maps and watch them move across the paper over time. And by the way, the storm that hit Xenia, Ohio is this storm right here. And, as we get to the modern day, everything's done on computers now, so there's no need for tracing paper. But this is much more complicated and much more detailed looking than this is. Because we know how you feel, we decided to give you kind of a how-to guide for using the new radar page, whether you want to use it like the old page with your part one basics, or if you want to add a few new tricks to your radar bag, which we're going to discuss in this video. So again, if you're kind of hesitant about using the new page, but you're a little bit curious, or maybe you're actually quite excited about this new page and you want to know how to navigate it, well, let's keep going with this video. So as we take a look at the new default radar page, it comes up to this national composite imagery here, and your menu is going to be located up here in the upper left-hand corner. And I've labeled things 1, 2, and 3. And option 1 here is select view. That's how you're going to show your radars, and this is the most similar way to the old way. This number 2, location, that's going to be how you navigate radars by location. And 3 is how you change your background maps and overlays. That's these 3 little lines here. So what we're going to look at first is the select view menu. When you click on Select View, it's going to bring up a menu in the upper left corner of the screen, so basically right underneath your menu up here. And that's going to be the same case for basically all of the stuff that we're going to go through. So once you click on this Select View here, it's going to bring up this menu. And the first two we're going to talk about are radar station products and National Radar Mosaic. So for the radar station products highlighted in red here, when you click on that, it brings up a map of radar locations around the nation, and this is sort of the way that we went over in part one, and this is very similar to what you're already familiar with the national radar map and all the different locations as dots. And those dots are color-coded by age of data or whether the radar is working or not working, so you can see some of these locations in red probably don't have any data or any new data, because the radar may be down. If you click on National Radar Mosaic, the second option, that's going to bring up a menu here on the left, which I've zoomed in on. And that menu is going to be all the different options of radars that you can look at for the national map. So it's not just the composite reflectivity anymore. You've got a couple reflectivity options, some composite reflectivity options, and a few newer options to look at as well. And by the way, if you're wondering, where it says QC'd here, that just means ground clutter has been taken out, so you don't get those random circles or donuts that you might otherwise see on a National Radar Mosaic. And also, by the way, here in purple, I've outlined these down arrows. If you click on the down arrows, they only kind of give you a brief information about the option that you're looking at. So to actually go to the option, you have to click on the word itself. So I click on radar station products if I want to go to the screen. And basically you're not changing screens anymore, it's just all in one screen. The second two we're going to look at here is weather for a location and all hazardous conditions. And these are a little bit different than what you're used to from the old radar page. So if you click on weather for a location, it brings up this map that basically overlays the current warnings and advisories, and you also have the radar listed on the map as well. And when you click on weather for a location, you can either click anywhere on the map to zoom in on that specific location, or you can type a location into the search bar. If for the all hazardous conditions, this is sort of like the weather.gov watches, warnings, and advisories map. And that's going to bring up a map of the current warnings and advisories currently in place nationwide. So that's kind of cool. A little bit more about weather for a location. Once you've selected a location, the radar is going to zoom right into that location, and it'll be centered on this little marker here. And it'll also display the current weather alerts in effect if you click on the right-hand option in pink, which I've highlighted that in pink here. And as you can see, there's like an outline here. It's sort of a little bit more difficult to see, but it's this tannish color. And we actually had a winter weather advisory out at the time that I took the screenshot. So if I actually were to click on this link here in blue, that would take me to the text product for this advisory, which gives the brief details of that here. And by the way, if you click on the alerts tab and you get the message, this feature is only available for the most recent time step, then you have to click on the blue words and say, click here to view the latest data, and that's going to be pretty obvious. It's going to pop up in this box here instead of this stuff. And sometimes it doesn't go away right away, so you might have to refresh or try again. The other cool feature here is the left-hand option in the menu now has this little weather symbol, which is a cloud or snowing cloud, and also the temperature. And when you click on that, it's going to bring up the current forecast, so the current text forecast, a graph of temperatures for the next few days, and it also tells you what forecast office covers the area that you've chosen. For instance, I clicked right in the Gaylord area, so obviously Gaylord forecast office, and there's the temperature map and the forecast for the time that I took this. By the way, if you're interested in bookmarking things, you can bookmark specific locations in your internet browser using weather for a location. So if you're familiar with bookmarking in your internet browser, once you do that, the next time you go to that bookmark, it'll bring up the latest information for the same location. So if I bookmarked this one for the Chippewa County area, then I could bookmark it, close out of it, come back to it another day, open that bookmark up, and it would bring up the latest information for the spot. So that's pretty cool too. Now we're going to take a look at the second option on the main menu, and this is location. There's a couple different things you can do with this. So when you click on the location, it's going to bring up this menu in the upper left corner of the map, and you have the option to search for a specific location. And when you click up here, and I've highlighted in red, but over here you can see it's just right next to the magnifying glass. You can click next to that and type in a location name. You can actually get pretty specific. As you can see, it brought up some more specific areas. But in general, you can click on a place, and then once you click on that location, the functionality is basically the same thing, or it is the same thing as the weather for a location from the select view menu. So if you click on Gaylord, Michigan, then it would take you back to this page here, and you would be able to look at the weather forecast and any current hazards going on for that location. So that's pretty cool. The other way to search by location is to click Use My Location, and that'll use the current location according to your computer or phone internet provider. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. You're still free to search by just typing in a name up here, but if you're if you're interested in just, click the button, use my location, then you can certainly do that as well. The other two options in the location menu are favorites and recent searches. And you'd favorite a location by clicking the star next to the place that you're interested in. So as you can see here, when you click on it, it darkens it in, and then it'll show up down here under favorites. And you can remove a favorite by clicking the X next to the place name. So if I click this X, then it would delete this from this favorites section down here. At this time, the favorites in this list don't stick around once you close the browser window, so you'd want to get everything set up the way you want it and save your bookmarks if you're a bookmark person before you close your browser window. If you've searched for more than one place, then all those places would come up under recent searches here. The next thing we're going to take a look at are those 3 lines and what exactly they are and some of the little things that you're able to do under that menu. So the 3 lines are actually just a symbol for map options. So when you click on them, it'll bring up additional options, mainly for backgrounds and overlays. So the first thing on the menu is this hide menu thing up here. And what that does is it turns this long box, which really isn't a huge deal, but it turns this long box into a single little box up in the upper left corner of your screen. So if you're trying to look at something in this part of the screen and you don't want to see the menu, then you would click on Hide Menu and it would take this over to this tiny little box. The second option is very helpful as well. This is if you get confused about what you're doing, you're not sure how to get your map looking the way you want, you're just about ready to flip your desk over. Don't flip your desk over, just go to the 3 lines, click Reset Map, everything will go back to the default and you can start over from scratch. And also just a brief mention, this advanced button down here probably isn't going to be useful unless you're a technology lover and interested in that kind of stuff. But most people probably won't need to use the advanced section. The next part on the menu for this 3 lines thing is the base layer, the background options, and that's this little drop-down menu here. And you've got 5 different options for that. Some of them look kind of similar, so you got to play around with them a little bit, but you do have a dark option. Like I know the current, or the one that's going away, that used to have a black background. This has a darker background as well, but there's also topographic and satellite options. And the last thing here is boundary overlay options, and you can toggle on the states, counties, and county warning areas or Weather Service Office jurisdictions. And something to note is that the order in which you click them will determine which of them is on top, which isn't a huge deal if you're looking at county and state boundaries, because usually county boundaries are also state boundaries, but that will determine if your CWA boundaries are on top or below your other boundaries. In this case, the county warning areas were clicked on last, so they showed up on top. Now we're going to take a look at some of the new radar products that are going to be available to you with the new radar page. So if you watched part 1, you saw how we got to the point of getting to the single radar. As you can see here, it's a KAPX Gaylord radar, and that's what's showing up in the background here. And we showed you how to get to this point and to the point of being able to pick your different radar options, your different products. The ones highlighted in pink are the ones you're probably more familiar with. And you might not be as familiar with these other options, which I've highlighted in yellow. So we're going to go ahead in a few minutes here and give you a brief intro on what those are. But in the meantime, we wanted to kind of give you a brief history of some of these weather radar improvements, because as we mentioned, we told you we understood what it's like to be overwhelmed and just confused about some of these new radar imagery products. And so here's a brief introduction about how we know how you feel. So up until the 1990s, most weather radars could only see the shape of the precipitation area approaching them. And as I mentioned earlier, tracking storms meant tracing blobs on thin paper maps. Basically, we knew it was raining or snowing somewhere, but we couldn't tell you much beyond that, aside from patterns and shapes that we'd come to recognize over time, like hook echoes and storm lines. In the 1990s, and many of you weather enthusiasts probably are well aware of this, we had the WSR 88D radars that came out. And, you might have heard of that as NextRad or Doppler radar, and those were installed nationwide in the U.S. And that was a revolution in radar technology because it allowed us to detect motion and speed of particles detected by radar. And that's all thanks to the Doppler effect, hence Doppler radar. And the Doppler effect really isn't super complicated, and you probably already know what it is, even if you don't think you do. If you think of a race car moving towards you, the closer it gets, the louder it gets until it passes you, and then the sound fades away again. Even little kids do this. Meow, meow, meow. The typical race car noise, that's the Doppler effect. And that same concept is how we're able to detect wind speeds and rotation, which is super important when it comes to watching for severe weather. So just as we were getting used to regular Doppler radar, along came the 2010s, and that brought us dual polarization or dual pol radar. And you might be wondering, well, why do you call it dual polarization radar? Well, all electromagnetic waves, including light, have a vertical and horizontal component. So dual pol radars send out both up and down and side-to-side pulses to detect particles in multiple dimensions, which allows us to have a more 3D picture of what's out there, whether it's rain, snow, hail, debris, and sometimes even birds. And this new radar system led to the development of new radar products, and some of those are available to you now in the new radar page. And just by the way, weather radars are not harmful to birds or other animals. So taking a look at our radar products, we're going to start right from the top, everything from the old stuff to the new stuff, right from the top of the list down to the bottom of the list as you're going through the radar page yourself. So we'll start out with super resolution based reflectivity, and it's basically the same radar reflectivity imagery you've come to know and love over the last 20 plus years since we got Doppler radar. And it's a high-resolution display of precipitation intensities detected by the lowest level scan of the radar. So this is basically the lowest the radar sees in the storms. And as always, your greens and your gray colors indicate lighter precipitation, yellows and reds indicate more intense returns, and probably more intense rain and storms. The next one on the list is super resolution based velocity, and again, same radar velocity product you've come to know and love, especially if you're interested in severe weather. This displays a high resolution version of radar detected velocities from the lowest level radar scan. So like base reflectivity sees, this is the lowest the radar sees. This is also the same scan, lowest the radar sees, but this is the velocity product. As always, greens indicate winds blowing towards the radar. So far, radar is right in this region, I would guess. So that's about the center of this circle. So if our radar's here, then greens are going to be blowing towards the radar. So they'll be going into the radar, or some component going into the radar, and the reds are winds going away from the radar. Brighter greens and brighter reds indicate stronger winds. And then we also have this empty line circle shape thing here. And that's due to range folding, which you might remember is the purple ring. And that's basically kind of the edge of the radar's detectable range. So the data beyond that or within that may not be terribly useful at times. Now this product is one of the new dual pol products, dual pol precipitation types. It uses various algorithms to determine what the detected particles most likely are, so it can give you an idea of what's out there as far as precipitation types. But be warned, with some of these dual pole products like this that are derived and use algorithms to determine what the detected particles are, it's not foolproof. So you got to be a little bit careful with this because sometimes it might say, oh, it's snow, but it's actually rain at the surface or something like that. So it's one of those things where, this is cool, but you also have to be a little bit careful with it too. And with the precipitation type, there's several different ones down here that it can detect as everything from no data, biologicals, birds, and things like that, ground clutter, so that's basically your circles and donuts that you normally would see on some of those radars, and it's like buildings and trees and things that are super close to the radar. Ice crystals, dry snow, wet snow, rain, heavy rain, big drops, grauple, which is snow or sleet covered in frozen droplets. And then we've got hail and unknown and range folding. So we have several different options of things that the radar can kind of give you an idea of what's out there. Now, dual pole differential reflectivity is another one of those new dual pole products. This one helps us figure out what the shape of the particles are based on the difference between the horizontal and vertical signals that are returned to the radar. So if the radar is thinking, oh, these are probably vertically oriented particles, then that's most likely these negative values. That's going to be those negative values down here that are these gray colors. And those are usually ice crystals. Horizontally oriented particles have positive values, so those are your colors up here. And that's usually associated with liquid water, which is actually hamburger shaped as it falls. It's not the traditional raindrop shape that we all know. It's actually kind of hamburger shaped. So that's kind of a cool thing to learn here. And if your particles, the radar can't tell if it's horizontal or vertically oriented, then those values will come in around 0. And especially in the summertime and severe weather situations, that's associated with hail, which tumbles as it falls, and so it appears round to the radar. Next, we have high-resolution echo tops, and this is based on an older radar product that you might not have seen before unless you're a more avid weather enthusiast. So high-resolution echo tops, they kind of give you an estimate of the height of the clouds based on the highest level at which the radar detects a certain precipitation intensity. So it can kind of give you an idea of how tall and usually how intense a thunderstorm is, because the taller the cloud, probably the more intense the thunderstorm is, because it usually means it's got a stronger updraft. So how to interpret this would be colors that are closer to yellow and red up here. Those are going to indicate taller clouds and thunderstorms. As you can see in this radar image here, which is from Caribou, Maine, by the way. They're the only place that had any active weather going on at this time. You can see there's actually a little bit taller clouds in through here, so there, might not be thunderstorms necessarily, but that might indicate more intense rain, perhaps. Next, we have 1-hour precipitation accumulation, basically the same precipitation product that you remember from the old page. In this, it shows how much precipitation converted to liquid has accumulated based on radar returns in 1 hour. So it can give you an indication of where the heaviest precipitation is falling and tracking with time. And this one, this doesn't accumulate like the storm total one. This one's, it's going to show that little blob moving kind of over the course of time. And again, this is similar to the old way. Values increase per the legend at the bottom of the map. So brighter the colors are following the color scale, higher precipitation totals. And yes, storm relative motion or storm relative velocity. Every storm chaser's favorite product is still here and has not changed one bit. It's still the velocity product after having taken into account the motion of the storms, and it's usually the best way to detect rotation in severe weather situations. So you interpret this the same way as always, and the same way as the base velocity product, and the greens next to reds rules still apply as they always did. Empty or purple filled rings, here, that's that range folding, and that's usually the edge of the detectable range for velocity returns. So you have to be careful once you get into that purple range or the empty range here, because that data might not be of the best quality, and you can kind of tell once you get beyond it, it just kind of looks like a mess out here. So that's one spot where you have to be careful, but you always had to be careful with this product for those reasons. Now this one's blank because as of the time that I'm recording this, the digital storm total product is not actually working. When it starts working again, we can update this presentation, or at least update this slide. But for now, you really don't need to worry about it. A storm total precipitation, on the other hand, is working, and this is also basically the same storm total precipitation product that you're familiar with from the old page. And this is the total converted to liquid precipitation detected by the radar over the last several hours or more. We'll usually reset that tally at the office after a day or so, depending on the situation. So you got to be careful about that, because sometimes you might wake up in the morning, know how much rain fell overnight, and it says nothing because the accumulation tally is already reset. So again, the storm total precipitation shows where the heaviest precipitation has likely been falling over the course of time, and this one does accumulate. So as those storms move along, the line gets longer. The heaviest precipitation area doesn't move. It just extends out depending on the storm and depending on the situation. And by the way, with both of the precipitation products, if you have hail in a storm, it can cause both of them to overestimate precipitation totals, which is one of the limitations for radar. And we'll discuss, some of these radar basics and limitations in some of our future virtual education discussions. And again, how to interpret this, same as always, increasing precipitation amounts per the legend at the bottom of the map. Base velocity, personally, I'm not sure why there are two base velocity options, but either one you can use, as basically the same thing as the super resolution version. It displays radar detected velocity and motion of particles. As with the other velocity products, greens are moving towards the radar, reds are moving away from the radar. Brighter greens or reds indicate stronger winds, and empty or purple rings indicate range folding, which is basically the edge of the good data from, at least as far as velocity is concerned. Now, composite reflectivity is also the same composite reflectivity you remember from the old page. It displays the highest reflectivity value from anywhere in the vertical over a particular spot, not just the highest value at the ground level. So because the radar looks from the surface, basically, or as close to the surface as possible, up, it's going to take whatever the highest value is in the vertical and plot it over whatever point that is on the map. So right here we've got some higher values at some point in the vertical. And how you would interpret this, similar to how you interpret your base reflectivity, your regular radar, your yellows and reds are higher intensity and probably a more intense storm, or at least more intense rain. And when you compare the composite to the base, if the composite reflectivity product is more intense, but the base reflectivity is not, then it's most likely that the core of the storm is still aloft and the worst is probably yet to come. But if the composite and the base are similar, so if I was to switch between this and the base and this red was still right there, then those intense returns are probably right at or near the surface. So in that case, if you're in a severe weather situation, you probably should have been in the basement already. Now we're going to take a look at high resolution VIL or VIL, and this is an updated version of another older product that you might not have heard of unless you're an avid weather enthusiast. And this is an estimate of liquid water in the vertical based on radar reflectivity. Higher values of VIL typically indicate more intense storms. And similar to most of the stuff, increasing values the further right you go along the legend, and values of this are in kilograms per meter squared of water. So as you can see here, there's actually a little bit of slightly higher VILs right here with the storm, or at least with this particular cell down there right off the coast, or right near the coast of Maine. So we've come to the end of our presentation, and this actually wraps up both parts of the how to use the new radar page. We'll have this and part 1, as well as some other resources for the new radar page on our website to help you make the transition from the old to the new.